At the will reading, Grandpa's lawyer handed me a check for $38 million. My father snatched it, struck a match, and burned it right in front of me. I didn't protest, I simply smiled. Because what he destroyed wasn't what he thought it was. Grandpa's lawyer handed me a check for $38 million. My dad grabbed it, lit a match, and burned it right in front of me. I didn't react. I just smiled. But what he actually incinerated was a decoy. It all started at the will reading. I hadn't seen my father in nearly 5 years. The moment I entered the room, he glared at me as if I were a court-ordered pest inspector. The conference room at Greaves and Halford reeked of lemon polish and ambition. My sister, Harper, was already there, legs crossed, wearing her usual smug expression, like she'd just won a lawsuit blindfolded. Leonard Greaves, my dad, sat at the head of the table, acting like a CEO at a shareholder meeting, not a will reading. Miss Halford, the lawyer, gave me a small nod. She'd been with the family for decades, back when they still pretended I was one of them. No greetings, no hugs, no questions about my last deployment, or if I'd even survived it intact. I wasn't there for them, anyway. I'd promised Grandpa Marshall I'd show up, and that was the only reason. Miss Halford cleared her throat, opened a folder, and began reading the will. Her voice was calm and professional, like someone reading instructions for assembling furniture that could ignite a domestic dispute. To Harper Greaves, she stated, the family property at Evergreen Lake and the antique Steinway piano. Harper blinked, probably expecting the company. To Leonard Greaves, she continued, a set of first-edition Hemingway novels and a $10,000 donation to the American Ethics Council made in his name. My father snorted, that's a joke, right? Miss Halford didn't flinch. She turned the page. And to Rowan Greaves, my granddaughter, my only confidant, I leave the remainder of my estate. This includes all financial holdings, real estate, and voting control over Braden Tech Systems. Effective immediately. Silence. My dad's jaw tightened. Harper's smirk faltered slightly. Then Miss Halford slid a check across the table to me. $38,246,000. Crisp, signed, dated. I hadn't even touched it before Leonard lunged. He snatched the check from the table as if it had personally offended him. You think this brings you back? He snarled. Right there, in front of the lawyer and Harper, he pulled out a lighter and set the damn thing on fire. The check curled in his hand, flames dancing over Marshall Greaves' signature as if it meant nothing. My sister gasped. Miss Halford leaned back, as if this wasn't her first time witnessing a man torch a fortune out of spite. Then my dad looked at me and said, that's what you get for walking out. I didn't flinch. I didn't shout. I just smiled. Not a happy smile, but the kind you wear when you already know the ending and you're just watching everyone else catch up. Because what he burned wasn't what he thought it was. He didn't see the second envelope, still tucked inside my coat pocket. The one Grandpa had given me a month before he died. The one he'd wrapped in a napkin like it was a sacred text. Don't open this unless they try to burn it, he'd told me. They did. So I would, but not right away. First, I had to sit in that polished room, enduring their fake grief and absolute fury, while Harper started rambling about how obviously something isn't right. My dad accused Miss Halford of forging the document, as if she were a criminal mastermind with a soft spot for military granddaughters. They kept going. Harper demanded a second reading. Leonard wanted an audit. I just listened, hands in my lap, feeling the heat of the fire fade from the table as they unraveled. If you're still watching, drop a comment and hit subscribe, especially if your family has ever tried to gaslight you out of your own identity. The thing about people like them is they only understand visible power. They think if they burn the paper, they burn the proof. If they raise their voices, they win. If they erase you on paper, you cease to exist. But they don't know me. They don't know what I learned in Kandahar, or how many nights I stayed invisible to survive. They don't know what Grandpa told me the day I left. You're the only one I trust to finish what I started. So when my dad flicked the ashes of that check across the table and told me I was out, I just smiled. Because I already knew I was the only one still in. Under the table, my fingers brushed the edge of the envelope still in my coat, and I decided I wasn't leaving empty-handed. They could argue, threaten, and set the room on fire for all I cared. My job was done the moment I saw the look on Harper's face when she realized the empire she thought she'd inherited had slipped right through her French manicured fingers. I walked out without a word. No door slam, no dramatic exit, just the steady sound of my boots on polished wood. The courthouse parking lot was half empty, just as I remembered. Same cracked asphalt, same leaning oak tree by the gate. I used to climb that tree when I was 8, before Leonard told me girls didn't belong in trees. That was the first time I thought maybe I didn't belong anywhere. The drive back to my apartment was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I just sat with the low hum of the road and the sound of my heartbeat trying to outpace my thoughts. The envelope felt like it was burning a hole in the passenger seat. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the kitchen, staring out the window at a street I didn't like, but never left. The weight of it all was still settling, the inheritance, the fire, the silence. It felt too familiar, like that other silence from years ago when I came home from my first deployment. It was Thanksgiving. I'd been gone for almost 18 months. Syria, border detail, convoy defense, you name it. I'd seen friends bleed out in the sand and buried a journal under rubble when a roadside bomb went off 2 feet from my tent. I still had the ringing in my right ear. But when I came home, Leonard said, "You didn't write." And that was that. No welcome home. No, I'm glad you made it back. Just a quiet judgment that filled the room like secondhand smoke. The house didn't look the same either. My room was gone, physically gone. Desk gone, bed replaced, bookshelf emptied. All my letters, photos, and graduation flag disappeared, as if I'd never lived there. In their place were 2 beige armchairs, a fake potted orchid, and a framed quote about calm waters and quiet minds. I remember thinking it looked like a dentist's waiting room, except this one had a door that used to say Rowan and now said guest. Harper passed me in the hall with a steaming mug of peppermint tea. She looked up, smirked, and said, "Don't be dramatic. You were gone for like a year and a half." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I left. I moved into a cheap apartment off the highway and worked part-time security at a logistics yard while waiting for the VA to process my paperwork. Every few weeks, a wire transfer would show up from someone named M. Greaves, just enough to keep the heat on and gas in the car. No notes, no contact. But I always knew it was him. He never said much, but Grandpa Marshall saw me like nobody else. When I was 12 and wanted to enlist in junior ROTC, he showed up with boots that fit and a grin like I'd just passed some secret test. When Leonard said the military was a dead end for people who couldn't cut it in business, Grandpa said, "Maybe that's why your board meetings feel like war zones." He didn't pick sides. He picked me. And maybe that's why when he got sick and the calls stopped, I knew something was wrong. I visited once, just once, near the end. He was thinner, quieter, but his mind was still sharp. He handed me the envelope at Hillcross Diner over lukewarm coffee and a shared piece of lemon pie. "Don't open this unless they burn it," he said. I remember thinking he was being dramatic. I said something sarcastic. "What, you think they're going to set fire to $1 million check?" He didn't smile. "I think they'll try to erase you." And just like that, we both knew what he meant. I hadn't opened the envelope yet, but I was getting close. Its weight on the kitchen counter grew heavier by the minute, as if it knew something I didn't. I stared at it for a long time, half hoping it would open itself and solve everything. But it didn't. I picked it up with both hands, as if it might bite if I moved too fast. The envelope was thick, sealed with red wax, the kind Grandpa always used for birthday cards, as if it made them more official. I cracked it open with my thumbnail and pulled out a single folded sheet and a USB drive taped to the back. The paper was typed, notarized, and dated 3 weeks before he died. It was a trust transfer form. The check had been real, but it was just a decoy. The actual funds were already transferred. The real inheritance had been processed quietly and legally, with a digital paper trail that would have made my father sweat through his expensive blazer. I stared at the account number at the bottom of the page. The last 4 digits were Grandpa's birthday, reversed. He knew I'd remember. I plugged in the USB. No password, no delay, just a folder labeled inheritance. Inside, bank documents, legal authorizations, company control transfers, and something that looked like a draft of a second will. I exhaled, leaned back in my chair, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, not safety, just confirmation. I wasn't crazy. But my relief lasted all of 5 minutes. I logged into my bank app to check the linked account. The app glitched. Then it gave me an error, account not found. I tried another card. Declined. I typed everything slower, as if being careful might fix whatever this was. Still nothing. It didn't feel like a glitch anymore. I called customer service. A guy named Dylan picked up and sounded like he'd rather be anywhere else. Hi. Yeah. My account is saying I'm not in the system anymore, I said. Can you check on that? He asked for my name, birthday, and last 4 digits of my social security number. I gave them all. Another pause. It was certified by the registrar's office 2 weeks ago. I hung up before my voice cracked. Next stop, DMV. I waited an hour behind a woman arguing about a parking ticket from 2006. When I got to the counter, I handed over my ID. The clerk looked at her screen, frowned, tapped a few keys, and then looked up. "Ma'am," she said, "you're flagged as legally deceased." I'm standing right here. I get that, but the system doesn't. You'll have to file a correction through Vital Records. How long does that take? Could be a few months. End of conversation. I walked out before I could punch a window. Back on the sidewalk, I felt like a ghost. People passed me like I was normal, like I still existed. But I'd seen enough bureaucracy to know once a system decides you're dead, it takes a hell of a lot to prove otherwise. And someone had made damn sure I disappeared. The sky was overcast. I pulled my coat tighter. Across the street, a woman stood watching under a line of bare trees. Sunglasses too oversized for the dim light. A blue silk scarf looped once around her neck. My mother's scarf, the one she said the dry cleaners lost 3 years ago. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there, still and silent, like a threat that hadn't spoken. I stepped into traffic and crossed slowly. When I reached the other side, she was gone. No footsteps, no trace. Back at my apartment, I pulled out every letter Grandpa had sent me over the years. Dozens, folded into neat stacks, tucked inside books, drawers, behind picture frames. His handwriting was steady, even near the end. I found an old brass key wrapped in a faded handkerchief in one of the envelopes. The tag read, Langford, Box 17. He gave it to me on my 18th birthday and said, "You'll need this someday." I guess someday had arrived. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed the key, and walked out the door before I could talk myself out of it. Langford's storage wasn't far. 15 minutes through the quieter part of town, old storefronts, cracked sidewalks, mailboxes hanging by one hinge. I parked in front of a wine shop that hadn't been open since before the pandemic and found the door between it and a boarded-up bookstore. No sign, just a black buzzer and a faded camera that blinked red once when I pressed the button. A woman opened the door. Late 50s, crisp ponytail. No name tag, no smile. "You have a key?" I handed it over. She looked at the tag, Box 17, checked a clipboard, then waved me inside without a word. The hallway was narrow and cold. Lights buzzed overhead like they hadn't been replaced since Reagan. We walked past 6 steel doors before she stopped at one, typed in a code, and opened it. "Take your time," she said, and shut the door behind me. The room was windowless, silent, just rows of drawers set into concrete walls. I found box 17 halfway down, waist level, and slid it open. Inside was a black fireproof folder and a manila envelope. No dust, no smell, like it had been waiting. I sat down on the floor. The first thing I pulled out was a certified cashier's check. Same amount, same name, but this time with security features baked into the paper. The watermark shimmered when I tilted it. Real. Taped to the back was a tiny red sticker, non-negotiable copy burned. That told me everything I needed to know. The manila envelope had a sticky note in Grandpa's handwriting on the front, "Trust no one, not even her." No name, just her. But I had a guess. Inside, printouts of emails, handwritten notes, legal drafts. He'd documented everything. Every conversation with his lawyer, every asset transfer, every board meeting agenda from Braden Tech Systems for the last 12 months. Some of the papers had Harper's name on them. Meeting minutes she attended. Contracts she signed. None of it looked casual. The final document was heavier. A flash drive inside a velvet pouch and a note, "Play only once and only when you're alone." I pocketed it and got out of there fast. Back at my apartment, I locked the door, pulled the blinds, and plugged in the flash drive. No label, no folders, just one file, M. Greaves. Final. I clicked it. Grandpa's face filled the screen. He looked tired, thinner than I remembered. He was sitting in the sunroom of his house in Hollow Bend. Light poured over his shoulder like a soft filter couldn't hide the truth. "If you're seeing this, Rowan," he said, "then they did what I thought they'd do." His voice was even. No drama, no shaking hands. He knew how to deliver a message. "I've watched them lie to your face, dismiss your service, turn your absence into ammunition, and I did nothing for too long. That ends now." He leaned forward slightly. "You're the only one who ever told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. That's why I left it all to you. Not just the money, the name, the company, the ground it's built on. I'm giving you the foundation, because you know what to do with it." He paused. A long silence. "Your father will try to erase you. He'll say you abandoned the family. He'll weaponize your past. He'll pretend you don't exist. Let him." Then he smiled, just barely. "Because the only thing more dangerous than a man with money is a woman with receipts." The screen went black. No logo, no goodbye. I was alone in a dark apartment with the weight of a legacy, sitting on a cheap desk I'd bought off Craigslist. I sat there a long time, not thinking, not planning, just breathing. I instinctively pulled the papers from the manila envelope and laid them across the floor, line by line, signature by signature, cross-referencing every number, every name. In the corner of one printout was a contact name I hadn't seen in years, Phoebe Winthrop, my dad's second wife. Technically, my stepmother, but only on paper. She'd vanished after Mom died, married Leonard within the year, and floated through life like a ghost with a perfect blowout and zero opinions. I hadn't thought about her in forever, but her name was there, right below a legal filing timestamp 2 weeks before Grandpa's death, which meant she'd been involved, and not in the background. I circled her name with a red marker and underlined it twice. Phoebe Winthrop didn't show up in many conversations, but things usually went sideways when she did. She was static, never the center of the noise, just enough to distort the signal. The last real thing I remembered her saying to me was at my mom's funeral when she put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Your mother was complicated." That was her version of sympathy. I rechecked the timestamp. The filing was lodged through a small estate law firm in Charleston, connected to a property Grandpa had held in trust for over 20 years. I never knew about that one because my name had never been on any deed until now. I opened the folder from the USB again and found a second address listed under Confidential Holdings, Langford, not the vault I had just visited, a second one I hadn't heard of. The file said, Box Array 6 billion. Entry via security list only. I paused. My name was printed next to the line, access level confirmed. Langford Security Vaults was 3 hours outside the city. The place looked more like a Cold War museum than a storage facility. Steel gates, motion sensors, guards with actual firearms. It's not the place you walk into with questions, unless you already have the correct answers. I drove out just before noon, parked outside the perimeter, and walked in with nothing but the old key, the printout, and nerves I hadn't felt since Kandahar. The woman at the front desk wore a navy blazer with no name tag. She scanned the key, then looked me up and down. ID? I slid it across the counter. She scanned it. Then she looked up. You're dead. Only legally, I said. I'm working on that. Her lips twitched like she wanted to smile, but knew better. She typed something else, then nodded. Follow me. I did. Down another corridor, colder than the first vault. More cameras. The silence was surgical. She opened a door labeled Array 6 billion and motioned me inside. No words. This one didn't look like a bank vault. It looked like a private evidence locker. I found Box 6 billion on the middle shelf. Opened it with the key. Inside was a black briefcase and a sealed manila folder with my name in block letters. No title, no stamp. Rowan Greaves, underlined once, as if it didn't need explaining. The briefcase clicked open with the old push-button latches. Inside, a deed, a corporate ownership ledger, a single flash drive in a velvet-lined pocket. The deed was for the Hollow Foundation, listed as a non-profit veteran support center located on the grounds of the Charleston property. The name on the document, Rowan Greaves, Executive Director, Sole Owner. Underneath it, legal filings confirming that all holdings from Braden Tech's Humanitarian Division were officially transferred to Hollow 6 weeks before Grandpa died. Quietly. Completely legal, no press. The ledger showed something else. Complete ownership of Braden Tech's executive shares had been reassigned through a trust mechanism that bypassed the family board. He'd handed me the company. Silently, without waiting for their approval. The flash drive lit up blue when I plugged it in. Inside, another video file, no title. I hit play. Grandpa was sitting in the same sunroom, this time with files stacked around him. If you made it to Vault 2, he said, then you figured out the first one wasn't the whole picture. He reached off camera and held up a document. This is the transfer of ownership for the humanitarian arm. The part 1 built from scratch after Vietnam. The part Leonard never touched because he couldn't monetize it. I left it to you because you never asked me for anything, but you showed up when it counted. He looked down briefly, as if to choose his following words carefully. I couldn't stop what they planned, but I made sure they couldn't erase you. You don't need their permission. You never did. All you need now is proof they forged your name. That's your keystone. Everything else will fall after that. He looked straight at the camera. Don't flinch, Rowan. They're going to come hard. The screen went dark. I sat there, surrounded by a dead man's voice and a war he'd left for me to finish. I slid the flash drive back into its pouch and called the one person I never thought I'd need. Phoebe didn't answer on the first try, or the second, but on the third call, she picked up with that polished, rehearsed tone, as if I were a reporter asking about her skincare routine. You knew, I said. A pause, just air between us. I didn't sign anything, she replied. I want that on record. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. You helped file it. I handed Leonard an envelope. I didn't ask what was in it. He said it was an insurance document for estate protection. I believed him. That wasn't a lie. That was how she survived in that house. I waited. He had a notary come by. A friend of his. She stamped everything. I thought it was something boring and complicated and rich people legal. He said you'd agreed to it. How long ago? 3 weeks before your grandfather passed. Did you see a death certificate? Another pause. A longer one. Yes. Your name was on it. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't thank her. Just hung up. Back in my apartment, I opened my filing cabinet, the one I hadn't touched in a year, and pulled out my original Social Security card, birth certificate, and passport. All still in my name. I took them straight to the county registrar's office and asked to speak to someone about a fraudulent death record. The clerk took one look at my paperwork and frowned. Then she looked at her screen. I don't know how this happened, she said, but your file was closed by court order. What court? Family Estate Division. The order came through as part of a sealed emergency motion. Very rare. Can I see it? No, she said. Not unless you get a judge to open it. How long does that take? She looked over her glasses. Depends on who you pissed off. I walked out with a headache and a printout that confirmed what I already knew. Someone had filed to erase me legally, and someone else had stamped it like it was routine. Back at home, I dug into the printed emails from the vault. One name kept popping up, Dr. Cambria Fenney, retired physician, used to do house calls for elite families, including mine. The emails showed she'd verified long-term mental instability and identity confusion in a letter addressed to the estate court. I had never met this woman. Her phone number was disconnected, but her address was still in the system, one town over. I drove there that night. The house was small, overgrown, and had peeling paint. No car in the driveway. The lights were off, but the mailbox had mail dated 2 days earlier. Someone still lived here. I knocked. No answer, so I sat in the car and waited. 30 minutes later, a sedan pulled up. An older woman got out with 2 grocery bags. The same name was on the license plate frame, Dr. Fenney. She saw me and froze. I got out and walked up slowly, hands in my jacket pockets. I'm not here to threaten you, I said. But you signed something about me, something false, and I need to know who told you to. She blinked hard, like her brain was buffering. Was it Leonard Greaves? She didn't answer, just nodded, slow and shameful. He said you were mentally unwell, she whispered. Said you'd suffered psychological damage overseas, that you believed things that weren't real. He made it sound tragic, and you believed him. I signed what he gave me. I didn't know they'd actually file it. You thought he wanted fake medical records for fun? I thought it was a formality for inheritance cleanup. He said you'd agreed to it. I didn't bother arguing. Get a lawyer, I said, and don't answer any more of his calls. She didn't respond, just backed toward her door and locked it behind her. It wasn't guilt that burned most. It was how easy it had been for them, how casual. Signing me off the planet was no different than renewing a car lease. And somewhere in that paper trail, I knew Harper's name was waiting. I drove straight to the only person I trusted who'd know how to burn it down without leaving a fingerprint. Sylvia Marsh answered the door in sweatpants and a threadbare Harvard Law hoodie, holding a slice of cold pizza and a mug of black coffee that smelled like it had been reheated twice. Her place was cluttered, lived in, and full of files that probably could have collapsed a senator or two if anyone knew where to look. She took one look at me and stepped aside. This better be illegal. It is. Good, she said, and handed me the pizza slice. Eat. You look like a ghost with a grudge. I know. I sat on her busted leather couch while she opened the folder I brought. She flipped through the documents like counting cards at a casino she owned. The death certificate, the false medical report, the estate filings, the ownership transfers, the check, the flash drive. She didn't speak until she reached the part with Harper's forged signature. "Classic," she muttered. "They filed it through a Delaware shell. Sloppy. Did they think no one would check? I think they didn't expect me to come back." She raised an eyebrow. "They filed you dead. That's not coming back. That's biblical." Sylvia used to run a non-profit legal aid group for veterans with dishonorable discharges. She'd represented soldiers falsely accused, wrongly imprisoned, and gaslit by their command. She once sued the Pentagon over a housing scam and won. That was before she lost funding, quit the nonprofit world, and started working out of her living room on cases the real firms didn't want to touch. "I'll need access to your VA files," she said. "And anything you have from the military, deployment orders, discharge papers, especially anything signed." I handed her a second folder from my bag. She scanned it and nodded. "This proves you're alive. Proves you didn't agree to squat. And if we can match the signature to the one they used on the stock transfer," she trailed off, "you can take them down." "No," she said. "You can." I hadn't expected that. "You want revenge or justice?" she asked, sipping the worst-smelling coffee I'd ever encountered. "Because they don't come in the same box." "What's the difference?" "Justice follows the law. Revenge breaks it." I didn't answer. She went to her computer, typed for 30 seconds, and then said, "Braden Tech's board will be vulnerable if we hit them at their annual audit window. That's in 11 days. If you want to blow this up, that's your shot." "I want it airtight," I said. "No spectacle, no scandal, just facts and fire." Sylvia grinned. "Facts and fire. That's going on my gravestone." She pulled out her phone and called someone named Miles. "Crow," she said, "got a live one. Military inheritance, fraud, forged death, the works. Meet me at the office. Bring the clean laptop." She hung up and turned to me. "Miles is a forensic document analyst. Worked odd intel. He's got the kind of eyes that can spot a forged signature at 50 yards, and he won't blink at who we're going after." I nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Full authorization, everything. I'll draft it up. In the meantime, don't talk to anyone. Don't post. And for the love of God, don't try to play hero. This isn't the part where you go rogue. It's the part where you let me build the kill shot." I leaned back on the couch. My hands were still clenched. Sylvia watched me. "You all right?" I thought I was done being in wars. She shrugged. "Family ones are worse. Fewer rules." I left an hour later with a burner phone, a folder labeled Temp Legal Hold, and a direct line to Miles Crow, who texted me exactly 2 things before I even got home: "We'll verify every doc, but first, we find the signature that buries them." I didn't respond. I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes and stared at the steering wheel. The last time I'd followed an order this precise, I was wearing body armor and praying no one tripped an IED. Now I was wearing a hoodie, carrying a USB drive, and about to incinerate my entire family name legally. The war had already started. This was just the first real shot fired. I tossed the burner phone on the passenger seat and drove straight to the storage unit where I kept what no one else knew I still had. Unit 11B sat at the end of a crumbling row of metal garages behind a busted fence in South Brighton. No cameras, no contracts with any national chain. Just a guy named Dennis who ran the place and didn't ask questions as long as your rent cleared. Mine always did. Inside the unit, a black plastic footlocker, military issued, scratched and dented like it had stories to tell. I cracked it open and pulled out my deployment binder, orders, discharge papers, mission reports, and most importantly, hard copies of my signature from 6 years of federal paperwork. Not digital trails, not edits, all original. I drove straight to Sylvia's office and laid everything on the table. Miles Crow was already there, mid-30s, wire-framed glasses, ponytail, and a resting face that said he once got interrogated and enjoyed it. He gave me a polite nod like we were co-workers in a crisis. No small talk. He picked up one of the documents, held it under a UV lamp, and then pulled out a separate folder labeled Braden Tech Equity Transfer. Gift Trust. Inside were the documents Harper had filed on my behalf. 2 pages in, Miles grunted. See this? He pointed to the loop in the G of my last name. You do this little hook on the downstroke consistently. But here, he flipped to the fake transfer document. Flatline. No hook. Also, the signature is scanned. You're sure? I asked. He didn't look up. It's a lift. Someone pulled it from a military DD-214, my guess. The 2018 discharge packet. It's public enough. Sloppy execution, though. Can you prove it? He snapped a picture and then pulled up software on his laptop. Side-by-side comparison, line pressure analysis, pixel compression levels, overlay render. In under 2 minutes, he said, I can write the affidavit tonight. This would fall apart in court in under 10 minutes. Sylvia handed me a printout. Here's what that forgery gave them. Harper sold 40% of your voting shares last quarter to a holding company tied to Leonard's real estate trust. They're trying to roll the company under full family control before the next board vote. My shares? She signed with your name. She signed with a fake version of your name during a time when you were legally deceased. It's not just a civil problem anymore. What is it then? Miles answered. Wire fraud, document fraud, possibly conspiracy. If Leonard coordinated the notary, definitely perjury. And if the assets cross state lines, we're in federal territory. Sylvia leaned forward. This is the thread. We pull it right and the whole sweater comes undone. I stared at the documents in front of me. Seeing myself on paper, my name, my handwriting, was strange, but knowing none of it came from me. Like watching someone wear your skin and wave from a balcony you never stepped on. Sylvia added, I filed a preliminary injunction to freeze the company's board action, but it won't stick unless we get a judge to see this evidence firsthand. What do you need me to do? She looked me dead in the eye. Stay alive. Stay quiet, and don't lose your temper. This only works if they don't know you're building the case. Let them think you're still stunned. Miles handed me a flash drive, backup of all my findings for your records. I put it in my pocket. The whole thing felt too neat, too logical, and that was precisely what scared me. My family didn't operate in logic. They operated in chaos, distraction, and narrative. I wasn't playing defense anymore, and they'd feel that soon. But first, I needed one last piece. A thread left hanging, one she never mentioned.